it's now at the point where like JD Vance on Charlie Kirk's show confirmed something I reported, which is that Charlie Kirk personally stormed into the White House and demanded that they not attack Iran.
I attended UVU. I went to that school. I won't get into the details of it. I didn't go there for a long time, but I did go to that school, and I grew up in Orem, Utah. So I know this area very well, and I know the people, and it's a very conservative Mormon, upper middle class white city. Now, I moved away from there years and years ago. I moved to Los Angeles in the late 90s. But it hasn't changed that much in the last 26 years. I can guarantee you that. So I want to start here by talking about just kind of the whole official story behind this, because it just does not hold up. And I think that's one of the reasons all of a sudden you're having the January 6th stuff come out, and they're trying to keep the ball rolling. So you kind of just like, let's forget about this. There's a lot that's fishy about it. Everything is fishy about it. And let's get into some of the finer points behind that claim. Now, first and foremost, I think Candace Owens has probably the best, takes on a lot of this. Firstly, because she was close to Charlie Kirk before he was really famous. There's footage of her and Charlie in Kanye's documentary. So she was around Charlie for a long time. Now there's a large effort to smear her and make her try to diminish her takes on this, obviously, which to me makes them even more relevant. But I want to start this bit by showing you her most kind of recent take on what the FBI is up to.
Even know if it's considered breaking news when it comes to the feds. Like, I don't think it's breaking news. I think it's just the news. This is what they do. Well, I have it now on a very well-placed authoritative source that the FBI is putting an absurd amount of pressure right now on the authorities in Utah and also the rest of the government in Utah to come out and to say that the Charlie Kirk case is closed. They want it over.
No disrespect to Utah here, but I feel like I'm uniquely qualified to make these criticisms, being that it's the place of my origin. Utah is a very fairy tale place where the predominant religion actually believes that Jesus Christ came to the United States. Now, there is DNA evidence that disproves that. They believe that there's a tribe of Israelites in North America. The religion was founded by a complete con artist named Joseph Smith. They had to forsake polygamy in order to get into the United States to become an actual state. And part of that was their prophet suddenly having a vision that polygamy wasn't okay anymore. And that's what the LDS Church does. Now, I've given them credit too. I think it's honestly smart to have a prophet that has visions and keeps their doctrine and beliefs up to date with what's current, because whenever something becomes inconvenient for them, like in the 70s, when it became inconvenient for them to discount black people, their prophet had a vision like, hey, black people are cool now. But the Mormon Church used to teach that black people had the mark of Cain and weren't getting to the same level of heaven as all the pretty white people. So, I just want to kind of preface this whole part of the story by giving you my kind of personal lived experience in Utah. People who are not Mormon, like my father, call it the Zion Curtain, because the Mormons called Utah Zion. That was their promised land, really. So there's a lot of parallels too between the Mormons and another very religiously run state in another part of the world. So just kind of, giving you a little bit of food for thought as we get into this piece where Candace has some points to make.
Want Charlie's assassination to be officially ruled lone gunman. it was a lone gunman that did that. Nobody else is involved. Now, why would they? Why would they want that? Right? What are they saying, at least to the authorities? Are they saying like, this is the reason? And I'm sure they're not coming out and being honest or saying something that might ring truer to us, the public, which would be them saying, well, we know who did this and we want to protect those people, so close the case. What they're actually saying instead is essentially, if you don't close the case against Charlie Kirk and rule it a lone gunman, then it might mess up our prosecution against Tyler Robinson. That feels a little bit to me like moral blackmail. Hey, man, we're not hiding anything, but we've got this guy, Tyler Robinson. If you don't close this case, then it might harm our chances of locking this guy up. Yeah, I'm sure.
The things that was curious about this too is how quickly, Kash Patel being like the new puppet at the FBI, he really wants to like prove himself. So he came out instantly like, within 33 hours, we caught the guy. Oh, here's my buggy eyes looking in different directions. Yeah, it's weird. It doesn't add up. And we're going to get into some really gory details about why it doesn't add up in just a minute.
I am sure that they are being just moral. I'm sure they're telling the truth to the authorities. Now, I want to remind you guys, we should take a look at their current case against Tyler Robinson to see if we should accept this narrative, because currently there is absolutely no video which shows Tyler Robinson firing the weapon or even taking aim at Charlie Kirk. In fact, the individual who filmed the footage of the shooter on the roof, the lone video that exists of the shooter on the roof, also told me that he doesn't think that Tyler Robinson is the guy. So how's that going to work for an eyewitness account? When he reported the shooter on the roof to Utah on the campus, he was clear that the person was wearing an entirely different outfit than the ones that they're currently trying to claim that Tyler wore on that day. Remember, Tyler was just supposed to be wearing a t-shirt and some jeans. He says, no, he was in tactical gear. The person that I saw was in tactical gear. Also, that eyewitness told me that gun doesn't even match what I saw. And like I said, this individual definitively has experience with guns. He teaches people how to fire guns. So according to him and what he observed, if he's going to be brought into this court case that they're saying they want to, they want to bring charges against Tyler, he's going to testify and say, no, that doesn't look like the gun. That doesn't look like the person. So how's this going to work? Also, according to the individual that told me this, regarding the feds trying to push for this case closure, the feds don't even have any footage that explains how exactly the rifle in particular got onto the roof. That stuns me. That's stunning information, right? Because all we have is, well, in the indictment, he dropped onto the roof at 12:15 p.m. Tyler Robinson just dropped onto the roof. I guess in our minds, we assumed on the basis of the picture that they released the sole picture or set of pictures from the same moment of him walking up the stairs. We assumed that he, like I said, stanky-legged it, the whole stanky leg all the way up onto the rooftop. That was our perception. But it turns out, according to my source, they don't know how the rifle got onto the roof. That's interesting. How are we...
There's also that picture of him at the Wendy's, or not Wendy's, it's Dairy Queen, like 15 minutes later. Like he just, in different clothing than they described. So I want to get into, Candace gets into a little more of the weeds about why this looks kind of wrong. And she has some video footage and tracked down actually the guy or the person who shot the video. So let's listen to a little bit of this as well. This is actually also really good. Candace Owens has been on top of this. I trust her reporting more than I trust pretty much anyone else's. Definitely anyone in the mainstream news.
Origin of a video that actually no press has been done on. It was the video of I assumed it was a student, and I think, we shouldn't make assumptions, who recorded the shooter on the roof. Remember? That started going viral. You remember the footage, and they're like, and there's a guy that's kind of speaking in the background. We can show you that footage right now. Let's take a look at that footage that we're referring to.
Getting right up.
Yeah. You think he'd already be in place?
You would think that. So there's somebody on the roof right there? Just saying. He just ran from over, where's my finger? Whoa. From over there, ran in. And now he's right there. Just saying.
Okay. So this footage proved very...
Have you seen that footage? I had not seen that until she pulled it up. That is crazy.
Difficult to track down. And what I mean by that is it was very simple for me to find the account that published the video and made the video viral. And when I reached out to that individual, they were immediately responsive. And I said, hey, where'd you get this footage from? And the individual said to me, a friend of a friend's like family member sent it. So I'm like, okay, you're telling me the chain is already twice removed. I said, do you know who took the video? And he said, no, I don't know who took the video. And when I asked the person who sent it to me to tell me who did, because I have all of these journalists, including yourself, reaching out to me, trying to get to the bottom of it, he just stopped answering me. I said, so your friend who sent you this video just stops answering you? And he then sends me a screenshot of a conversation that they're having on an app that I don't recognize, right? So we are prodding that, and he has been responsive, so I'm sure he'll tell me what app this is. And sure enough, the person says, well, there were two people actually who took that footage, which obviously isn't possible, but there are two people that were involved in taking that footage, and he sends him two numbers. And those two numbers were both Chicago-based. And when I looked up who, whose numbers those were, it looked to me like that was just kind of leading to nowhere. Like, why are these two Chicago-based numbers? It was very weird and very sketchy. So then I have a guy who's on the ground in Utah, and I asked him, a student, to start looking around, fishing around, and seeing if he could figure out who took that photo. Again, operating under the assumption that this must have been a student that was walking by Pelosi Center. And he comes back and he says, I have a number of an individual. This is allegedly the person who took the footage. And I said, do you know that person? Is this a UVU student? He said, no. And I said, well, where'd you get this number from? And he says, well, on the day, there was a guy named Aaron who was walking around and was checking on people. And Aaron is the one that gave me this number. I don't know Aaron even, but like, he's the person that gave it to me. So then I said, can I have Aaron's number? He gives me Aaron's number. And Aaron also has a Chicago number. So I'm getting from somebody on the ground, and I'm getting from this person on Twitter that all of these Chicago numbers are involved, and that's not making sense to me. And I then tried to text that number of the person who allegedly shot the footage. We didn't get a response until today. We finally got a response from that person. I hop on the phone with him. He explains that it wasn't just him. It was one other person who he was walking with who saw this person run across. Neither of them are students of UVU. One of them said he was a student at BYU, which is Brigham Young University. And he's like, well, I didn't take the footage, but my friend took the footage. And his friend does not have a Chicago-based number. So I am confused. And we ask if he'd be willing to send us the footage and to get us on the phone with the person who actually took the footage. I had a conversation with that individual after all of this running around, hence the reason these episodes take so long to put together, because you're calling people, you're waiting for responses. And what he said to me completely betrays the narrative of what the FBI has put out. I am working to quadruple confirm exactly who this individual is, but he was very much, and maybe this is a poor way of saying it, a straight shooter, said, yes, I have a training. I don't want to give too many identifying details here, but this person himself has a lot of experience with guns and knows guns and, helps to train people in that sort of capacity, and said that they observed that individual, the FBI saying that the shooter dropped onto the roof at 12:15 didn't make sense to him. He said earliest it was 12:22 that the individual ran across, set up, took the shot. And I said, well, you must have been there, because he then sends me I wanted to see all of the metadata of when he took that footage. And the metadata begins at 12:22 and goes into 12:23, the very minute that Charlie gets shot. And he says, yeah, I saw the shot. I had just stopped recording about 20 seconds before the shot rang out. And he said that he told them a description of what the shooter looked like. And it was not the description that the entire world received less than 24 hours later of this person, Tyler Robinson, wearing jeans. I said, was he wearing jeans? He said, no. Actually, this person was dressed in tactical gear and he was wearing a face mask. And he said, according to him, and like I said, he has a lot of experience with guns, that this person looked to him like a foreign agent. I don't know if he's wearing all black, how he got that, but he said he was very certain that this person was skilled, knew exactly what he was doing, and was highly trained, like a highly trained assassin, so to speak.
Okay. I think we can all agree that's pretty obvious from how it went down. Just the moment that it occurred, where he was hit. Even Caitlin Johnstone had a tweet that I shared in a previous episode about how she's like, I don't believe it was some blue-haired leftist. I believe it was like the typical military-trained right-wing assassin, which everything kind of points to. And this is it's only getting murkier and murkier. But I want to jump over to just to kind of show you the spectrum. Here's another right-wing person who is not buying the narrative. And what's even crazier about this is it's Matt Walsh, who is on Ben Shapiro's Daily Wire network still, So let's listen to a little bit of what Matt had to say.
Yesterday, just hours before the district attorney of Utah County formally announced the charges against Charlie Kirk's assassin, and before he ran through some new evidence that authorities had collected, a left-wing journalist named Ken Klippenstein published an exclusive article on his Substack, which happens to be one of the most popular political Substacks in the country. To much fanfare, Klippenstein reported that he had obtained private messages from people who knew the shooter, which were sent on the day that Charlie Kirk was killed. These messages were uploaded to a private server on Discord, which is a communication service that's popular among young people, particularly young people who play video games. Here's one of the screenshots that Klippenstein provided in his article. As you can see, at 3:17 p.m. on September 10th, somebody wrote, Charlie Kirk got shot. And then around 30 minutes later, somebody writes, dead. Roughly an hour after that, somebody else writes, I just saw that video, RIP, I guess, bro didn't deserve to go out like that, sad. And then according to this screenshot, the messages stop there. No one says anything at all, again, until late the next day on September 11th at 8:57 p.m. And that message comes directly from the shooter. He says he's sorry and tells his friends that he's going to turn himself in. And then on September 12th, this message was posted in the Discord server. It reads, hey, everyone, if you have not seen the news yet, Tyler's post is true. He was taken into custody earlier today for the shooting of Charlie Kirk. While Charlie Kirk's politics were not acceptable to some, I ask that we all say a prayer for him and his family during these confusing times. Close quote. Now, the rest of the article contains quotes from one of the shooter's friends claiming he was generally apolitical. And then Klippenstein offers this conclusion, quote, Trump and company portray the alleged Utah shooter as left-wing and liberals portray him as right-wing. But the federal conclusion will inevitably be that he was a so-called nihilist violent extremist, NVE. Now, to recap, some members of the shooter's Discord group shared a small number of screenshots with a popular left-wing Substack author. The screenshots show that the community was mostly focused on video games and wasn't celebrating Kirk's death in the slightest. Allegedly, the author publishes those screenshots and presents them as proof that the shooter was not actually left-wing. Supposedly, he was just nihilistic and, angry at the world. Very transparently, the intent of this article was to deflect any suspicion from Discord and the people the shooter was interacting with on the platform. And presumably, that's why the shooter's friends gave those screenshots to Ken Klippenstein to begin with.
So I want to stop here for just a second because I'm not showing you this because I agree with Matt's take, because I think Matt's take on this is largely that it was a leftist and these people are just trying to debunk that. I think it's much deeper than that. I think these people are sharing these to show that it wasn't, this guy didn't have a real political reason to do what he's accused of doing. But let me let Matt talk for a couple more minutes here.
But in truth, in reality here, the screenshots raise far more questions than they answer. So let's pull that first screenshot up again. Let's look at this again. After Charlie is shot, according to the screenshot, there's a grand total of 5 messages on this Discord server written by 2 people about the assassination. And none of them are incriminating or even controversial. And these messages stop by 5 p.m. The entire evening of September 10th, after all this had happened, and most of September 11th, the next day until 9 p.m., no one says anything at all. And then, out of nowhere, the shooter confesses. He basically tells an empty room that appears to be uninterested in the Kirk assassination that he did it. Now, this is not evidence, as Ken claimed, that the shooter had no political motivations and wasn't operating as part of a coordinated terror plot. It does not exonerate the shooter's acquaintances in any way. It's actually very odd as far as evidence goes. I mean, it suggests that some messages from this Discord server may have been deleted or redacted before the screenshots were sent to Ken Klippenstein, which would not be shocking, by the way. I mean, these people obviously have every incentive to make it appear as though they didn't know about this and were not celebrating it and had no hand in coordinating it.
I think the idea that someone claiming they did something in a Discord chat is any kind of evidence whatsoever is absolutely ridiculous. What's tied to that? Okay, I have a lot of questions. First of all, is that Tyler's account that said that he did the shooting? Where was it posted from? When was it posted? Did he post that from his phone while he was chilling after the event? I want to see. That's why I like what Candace is doing, because she's kind of putting together a timeline here and a sequencing. And I'm sure it's going to include all these alternate pieces, like the guy who we just showed that filmed someone running across the roof right before Charlie was murdered. But I think, let's stop there with Matt, because I just wanted to point out that his take is that the most current batch of evidence presents more questions than answers. And so I think the feeling, regardless across the board, despite the politics of these different commentators, specifically Matt, because like I said, he's one of the guys who is very pushing very hard to make this a left versus right thing, to make this like, oh, a leftist assassinated a right winger because he's a Christian and he was trying to spread values, and these people are just like immoral murderers. You know, that's what they want to. They want to fight. They want us fighting each other over dumb shit like this, like left versus right team sport nonsense, you know? And I think one of the things that the South Park people said in our last segment about how Israel and Palestine aren't football teams that you cheer for, the same is true for political parties in America, even though it's been degenerated to that. Everybody has been reduced to this team sport thing. I saw this yesterday with my cousin, who I love more than most people, with the RFK Tylenol thing. As soon as it came up on the radar, she's like, oh, that's so stupid. And then I was like, well, wait, you know, and she put her headphones on and started watching TikToks to like reinforce her worldview while I watched this breakdown of how, you know, which we'll get into in a few minutes, about the nuance of what RFK Jr. said about Tylenol. So anyway, we need to get away from that. But to keep going with this Charlie Kirk thing here, there's some recent stuff that popped up on my radar that is really interesting. So just to get to the most recent kind of news related to this story, here is a tweet I saw this morning about the roommate, who is very suspicious for a lot of reasons. You know, the authorities were saying that the roommate was working with them and kind of like almost absolving any guilt. But this is really interesting. Vanished or never even existed. Charlie Kirk suspect's trans lover has vanished. Shaken neighbors share fresh fears as new photos show abandoned home. St. George, Utah. So St. George is also so far away from UVU. I don't know if you know this or not, but the way that Utah is kind of built up, St. George is in the south, right next to the border with Arizona, where Orem, where the shooting occurred, is way up in the middle of the state. It's like a 3 to 4 hour drive from St. George to Orem, Utah. So that's another weird kind of, you know, element of this story, is how far away the shooter lives from where the murder occurred. I mean, I guess maybe it's not that crazy, you know, if you're going to do a crime, like maybe don't do it close to home, I guess but it is also odd, and it's not something that I think a lot of people understand. So anyway, some of the comments on this are interesting too. So it was all lies for the FBI to please their pedo king who created the false narrative before there was even a suspect. This is outrageous. This is why there's never been a public statement from him. Yeah. Anyway. You have this meme of Kash Patel. See, and I got to give the MAGA folks credit more than I give credit to the liberals, because the liberals, I believe at this point, actually, I don't believe, I know the liberals are much more of a cult than their MAGA counterparts. And as you can see from stuff like this, where they're actively criticizing the people they were behind and calling them out for their bullshit, which you didn't see very much, if any, of from the Democrats during the Biden years or the Obama years, to be honest. So another element to this story, I think, that hasn't really been talked much about is this piece of news, that a neighbor reported that about 2 weeks before Kirk's assassination, several people with out-of-state license plates were seen coming and going from the $1,800 townhouse that Robinson shared with his transgender roommate, heading that they did not give off a good vibe. So that is another just kind of interesting piece of this story that I don't feel like we are, that a lot of people are not really talking about anyway. And it's something that, these people have lost all trust and credibility. And I want to dive into two last little bits of media, let's say. I want to dive into two last little bits of media that are related to this story. The first one is going to be the world's greatest journalists, Max Blumenthal and
Daily with Charlie Kirk, giving him talking points for his upcoming tour, and that Charlie Kirk was pushing back, and that he seemed frustrated, and that he had kind of like he was under the influence of people that Wolicki didn't like. So it was very clear Charlie Kirk was undergoing a transformation. And so if we start from the beginning, Netanyahu is trying to claim Charlie Kirk.
So it was very clear that Charlie Kirk was undergoing a transformation. That's one of the things I wanted to play this clip for, because Max has been doing a lot of reporting on this, talking to a lot of sources, collecting a lot of information. So for him to say that is a big deal, because I know that with a lot of my friends on the left are like, oh, well, Charlie Kirk was a Zionist, blah, 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 blah. The idea that Israel might be involved is crazy. And it's like, I don't know if it's crazy. I'm not saying it happened, but there's a lot of suspicious shit really. It's a possibility. Let's put it that way. I still believe it's a possibility. There's no evidence. There's no clear evidence, which is something that Max and Aaron have both said as well. But just there's a lot of suspicion based on, let me let these guys explain, because they do a better job explaining it and have done a lot more research than
Kirk.
I have, so.
He thought it was going to go very well, and that none of this would come out. It all comes out. It's now at the point where, like, JD Vance on Charlie Kirk's show after Kirk was killed confirmed something I reported, which is that Charlie Kirk personally stormed into the White House and demanded that they not attack Iran after, towards the end of the 12-day war, that they not.
That right there is probably one of the most incriminating pieces of evidence, I think, that, well, maybe not pieces of evidence, but basically pieces of information, because, the fact that it's been confirmed that Charlie was against the Iran thing and was actively vocal about it with the president, that makes a lot of enemies, not just Netanyahu. That makes him enemies of the defense industry in the United States. And where do you think Turning Point gets a lot of their money? So I'm going to let Max and Aaron keep going, though, because they obviously deliver the goods in a lot better, in a lot more of a real way than I do. I'm just here to I'm just here to be another one of their enablers.
Basically rescue Israel. Vance confirmed that. So Netanyahu had a real problem, and then something else was happening at the same time. And I have no control over this. Like I said in my first piece, there is no evidence that the Israeli government played a role in Charlie Kirk's assassination, and I called it an unsubstantiated theory. All right? So just to be clear about that, other people drew the conclusion that Israel did kill him, and they were getting millions of impressions on social media.
And given what Israel gets away with every single day, you can understand why people would draw that conclusion. It's understandable in this context where Israel has impunity to do whatever it wants, and is therefore and is so evil in its actions. It's a natural suspect for anything, even if there's no evidence to support it.
Yeah, of course. I mean, they hold the record for global assassinations.
Yeah. That's
their MO. And they take credit for assassinating journalists every week in the Gaza Strip. They boast about it. But here, this provoked Netanyahu not once, but twice, the second time on his personal prime minister social media channel, to declare to categorically deny that he assassinated Charlie Kirk. I mean, when have you ever seen a foreign leader come out on his own volition and volunteer that he didn't assassinate a U.S. political leader?
Yeah.
It's never happened before.
Yeah.
And so many people actually took that as a confession of guilt. I saw it as, for once, Netanyahu may not have assassinated someone, and he just wanted everyone to know that for once he wasn't guilty. But I don't, I'm struggling increasingly to accept the official story as the official story grows murkier and murkier about this assassination. And I'm just, I would like to see a better investigation and more evidence. And the internet is definitely not buying it. So these theories are going to abound and run wild. And, you know,
There you go.
for all I care, you know, I really don't care if people blame Netanyahu or not. I just don't.
I think the point he just made there is probably the best one I've heard about this, because the investigation has been so terrible. You're going to get these wild conspiracy theories like Israel did it, because Netanyahu came out right like while Charlie's body was still warm and was like, Charlie Kirk is such a great man. He was a lion. He was a good friend of Israel. Like, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. It was like very weird. I responded to Max's tweet about Netanyahu's saying that, like, it's very suspicious that he felt the need to comment on it as much as he did. But also, again, Max, just to reiterate the great point that Max made, when you have an investigation that's this shoddy and this clearly bungled and clearly a joke, you're going to have these wild theories abound because it's clear that the official story is bullshit.
Don't have any evidence of that. Ben Shapiro also came out and denied that Israel did it.
Yeah.
How would he know anyway?
Yeah.
I mean, he's just a tool. But this is this was deeply, deeply damaging to Netanyahu's PR and his ability to claim Charlie Kirk's legacy. And why did it matter so much? Because Charlie Kirk stood atop the last base of grassroots support that Israel commanded inside the United States. And it's falling apart. There's a conservative revolt against Israel and Israeli influence inside the US. And they need that base because they need those young white Christian men to go to war for the self-proclaimed Jewish state.
Yes. And that to me is the significance of your story. That to me is what this is all about. It shows that just the very thin grasp they have over the American right and how they're scared of losing it. And they need that to be able to continue being the Jewish supremacist state that they are. And the intimidation tactics they go to against.
Let's be honest, they have a strong grasp on the Democrats too. Look at Hakeem Jeffries. Look at Chuck Schumer. Look at any of them, even AOC. She's in Brooklyn. She was funded. The story just came out recently that she was like in her early days, she was funded by some Israeli tech guys. So it's the Democrats are just a little bit more sly about it, where the Republicans have always just been chest beating, like, we love Israel types. And now that part of the movement is realizing that if you really want to make America great again, you can't send billions and billions of dollars to a foreign parasite state that just, really uses that money to buy your goddamn Congress and forge policy to their liking in your country.
People, the combination of bribery, funding, and then blackmail by taking it away. I mean, that's how they operate. And, you've been covering Israel for a long time. So how does this fit into Israel's overall longstanding efforts to basically preserve U.S. support, especially from the political bases that are most important to them, like evangelicals and Congress?
Well, Israel's support is completely top down in the U.S. The bottom has dropped out of it. So these three articles should be read as a kind of inside story of how Israel lost the right-wing grassroots. They're gone. They're completely gone. And
just to close this out, I want to show you some of the things that Mr. Kirk was saying, because again, a lot of people will point out rightly that Charlie was a Zionist. He was very pro-Israel. He was Mr. I love Israel. He was Mr. This and Mr. that. But then also he was not. In recent days, things had changed. And you could see this by, as Max reported, the last TPUSA event where Tucker Carlson spoke and said things like, if you fight for a foreign country, you should lose your citizenship. And people got up and walked out. And Megyn Kelly criticized Israel. And so, you know, I get it. Like it is true that Charlie Kirk was very pro-Israel and very Zionist for a long time. But I want to show you this last piece of evidence, or this last piece of media. This last bit of media, a little bit of media for you. This last bit of media that kind of confirms his trajectory. And, you know, just enjoy.
And Jewish donors, they have a lot of explaining to do, a lot of decoupling to do, because Jewish donors have been the #1 funding mechanism of radical, open border, neoliberal, quasi-Marxist policies, cultural institutions, and nonprofits. This is a beast created by secular Jews. And now it's coming for Jews, and they're like, what on earth happened? And it's not just the colleges, it's the nonprofits, it's the movies, it's Hollywood, it's all of it. It's like time for you guys to wake up and say no more, draw a line in the sand. I don't care if you hate me. Jewish communities have been pushing the exact kind of hatred against whites that they claim to want people to stop using against them. Now, I don't like generalizations. Not every Jewish person believes that. But it is true, the Anti-Defamation League was part and parcel with Black Lives Matter. It is true that some of the largest financiers of left-wing anti-white causes have been Jewish Americans. They went all in on woke, and it wasn't just ADL, it was some of the top Jewish organizations in the country that have done that. In fact, we have seen this with the recent retreat of Jewish donations that are no longer going to be administered to colleges, right? Mark Rowan, Leon Kaufman. Can we get that full list? It's very powerful. The part of it, so that's totally true. And by the way, Tucker Carlson reinforces this. So I'm going to kind of, there was quite a day on the internet. Tucker Carlson was interviewing Candace Owens. We have Candace Owens coming up next hour. And Tucker Carlson mentions that Jewish Americans have primarily been financing cultural Marxist ideas. We said this, by the way, last week, and people came after us. We actually said it in a different way. We said, I'm glad that Jewish Americans are reconsidering their financing of cultural Marxism. And people misunderstood it intentionally and slandered us as being anti-Semites. But listen to this. Tucker Carlson is completely correct by saying this, is that the philosophical foundation of anti-whiteness has been largely financed by Jewish owners in the country.
How did these guys not know this was taking place? So I've been in Israel many times. The whole country's a fortress. When I first heard this story, I still had the same gut instinct that I did initially. I find this very hard to believe. I've been to that Gaza border. You cannot go 10 feet without running into a 19-year-old with an AR-15 or an automatic machine gun that is an IDF soldier. Right? The whole country is surveilled. I think some questions need to be asked. Was there a stand-down order? Was there a stand-down order? 6 hours? I don't believe it. Israel's the size of New Jersey. When I took a helicopter ride from Jerusalem to the Gaza border, it's 45 minutes. 6 hours. They're live streaming the killing of Jews. Did somebody in the government say stand down? That is a legitimate, non-conspiracy question. The whole country is the IDF.